Okay, welcome to the Atheist Society Lecture. Tonight our speaker is Hanno Salem, and he's speaking on a brief history of consciousness, its emergence and evolution. So without further ado, Hanno Salem, he's got a background in philosophy, psychology, linguistics, marketing, education. Right. Okay, thanks, Hanno.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. I've got a tracking camera here, so I've got to be careful with my movements. It tracks my movement all right. My name is Henny. I've started my YouTube channel about 3 years ago, and I mainly communicate topics of science, philosophy, psychology, and stuff like that. I broadcast both in Arabic and English because I've got a background of mixed parents. So I grew up in a household both in English and Arabic. I do a lot more Arabic because I think this is the area of the world that needs the most love at the moment. There's so much behind. They think evolution is collapsing in the West, and ID is in control, which I'm trying to debunk. Today is a very, very interesting topic because these two areas in particular, being consciousness and morality, have always been debated that they are abstract. They're way too abstract and they're not attached to any materialistic realm. And therefore, they might indicate or signal the superintendent in the sky or somebody who is independent of our existence. I'm today going to argue the point that both consciousness and morality have evolved through natural selections, through the normal mechanics of natural selection, as well as the search for energy, aka food. So I'm going to display a couple of slides. We can start presenting, please. So this is the topic of today. It's quite clear there. We're going to be talking about. We want to start with. Sorry, go ahead.
Can you speak up a bit?
Yeah, sure. I'll speak up a bit, and I'm going to try to.
Might be a good idea to use the microphone.
Sure. I'll get closer to the microphone, but also I need to be moving around. So I'll raise my voice so you can hear me. I know, being in the church and all. So we are going to be talking about, to start with, we're going to talk about consciousness before morality, because I would argue that morality would be a byproduct of being conscious. So you've got to first talk about being conscious first. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Okay. So the argument that I'm going to be laying today is that consciousness has, just very much like evolution by natural selection, it is a movement of millions of microsteps that started at something very less sophisticated than a normal consciousness. When we're talking about consciousness, we're talking about the problem of qualia. We've got our own philosopher, Aussie philosopher, David Chalmers, who coined the term, the hard problem of consciousness. That is, it cannot be explained away. Today, I'm going to try to explain it away through natural selection and physical realm. I think Daniel Dennett has sort of argued the same point, but I'm going to use a slight scientific angle to this. Next slide, please. Sure. Sure, okay. I'm very mindful as well. I've got lots of materials I want to cover, so I want to cover as much information as I can.
It's all on the screen, so we can see what you talk about.
Yes. Yeah. So the first thing you want to, it's almost like the abiogenesis of consciousness, how the non-conscious became conscious. And this is the very first question, because nobody could answer that question. And how would one become conscious in the first place? If you are a pan-psychist, you actually believe everything has got consciousness, including rocks. Some people believe that. I would argue that we're going to skip that step because rocks and stones simply don't display behavior. And therefore, I'm going to be sort of discounting them from this equation. I'm going to be focusing on living organism that have response to stimuli and display the 7 steps of Mrs. Gryn. If you remember Mrs. Gryn, the 7 characteristics of a living being, all the way from reproducing to, go ahead.
You're explaining artificial intelligence.
Oh, true, because we know the origin of that. We are the origin of that, so it's not a mystery. That'll be great, yes. So I am going to be talking for about 30 to 40 minutes in total, and if we can probably note down your questions, and I'll take them all towards the end, please. Thank you. So we're going to be focused on living organism, and I am going to be using very simple definitions here. Erwin Schrödinger, the very famous physicist, with the cat both alive and dead, has actually written a book pretty much on biology titled "What is Life?" And his definition of life is way simpler than the 7 characteristics needs to be displayed by a living organism. That's kind of advanced, but I am going to define a living organism by the simplest 2 characteristics it needs to do to be categorized as a living thing, which is sustaining itself and making more of its kind. So reproducing and being able to function. And for these 2 simple steps, you need the most important thing, which is energy. And energy means food. Thank you. I am going to be arguing that the evolution of organism has not started the way we are right now. The full consciousness of the qualia, of you being sort of in a state where you can realize the outside world as well as your inner self, your inner feeling, your inner thoughts. This has evolved over time from simpler forms, and that's exactly what I'm going to be arguing, the evolution of consciousness. And I'm going to be displaying a couple of animals in the animal kingdom. There is one in particular called Trichoplax adherens, and it's a marine animal. It's a very, very primitive animal, and that particular animal, in its search for energy, being food, moves haphazardly. It does not have any intention, it just moves all the time. And what it does, it only slows down when there's food and speeds up in its absence. It does not direct itself in any way or form. It just, when there's food in the surroundings, and then it will slow down to spend more time absorbing that food. Otherwise, it will just move aimlessly. And that's the way. And for that particular animal, does not have organs. It does not have consciousness. It does have a central nervous system. And therefore, you can argue that in the search for food and energy to start with, you don't need consciousness or even self-awareness. So there's no targeting and is not aware. Next slide, please. So, as you know, this is a competition. To search for food, you're going to be competing with other organisms that is also searching for food. And in natural selection, there's always an improvement in the way you search for food. So the next step in evolution would be moving toward food intentionally. So they're adding a bit of an intention there in your direction. So it's not just moving at random and hoping there's food in the surroundings. This time around, you're going to be targeting areas where there's food. There's a bit of intentionality in the way you move. And obviously, if you can do that, you can also kill 2 birds at the same time by moving away from predators who would want to eat you. And we moved to another worm. It's called the funny face worm because it's got a funny face like that. It's a flat worm with 2 arms up, and it's called Dagesia trahina. And its action is based on their physiology. If they're hungry, they'll start moving. If they're not, they're sedentary. And it has chemoreceptors on top of its head. The chemoreceptors will smell food and will move towards food. It's not aware of it. It's just an extra tool for it to detect and therefore move intentionally towards food. But at that point still, the thing is not self-aware or not conscious of the surrounding. It's the chemical receptors only act as a tool to detect areas of food. And then if you notice, there was still no perception of distance. So it has to be within the range of what chemoreceptors can receive for it to receive the signals that there is food. So the next step of evolution is to improve on this, is you want to add context, and you want to add depth and spatial awareness. And vision is the prime candidate for this. And when we're talking vision, we're not talking about, because that's probably another conversation, the evolution of the eye. It's 12 different steps over millions of years. But we're talking about the pinhole, maybe the 10 slides from darkness, and that's how the eye is evolved. But if you add that to an organism, it will start. The phrase "out of sight is out of mind." The previous organism, if the food is not inside, they will not think about it. But when you add vision, you'll be able to focus on food because it's within your sight, and it adds depth and awareness to your spatial area. The next step, once you've added all of that information, you want to add memory, the ability to retain information. Memory is such an important step towards evolution, because eventually will lead to the awareness of time. But with memory, you can now think about food when not in range and not even in sight, because you can actually remember the experience when you had food or you're hungry. So you actually can imagine things through memory. So the ability to remember things has emerged, and it's called in psychology something called object permanence. Object permanence is a situation where you can be aware of the existence of things even though you can't see them. Human babies tend to develop this cognitive ability when they're 8 months old. However, baby chicken would develop that within 48 hours. And that's the ability to know there's something even though it cannot see it. So if you put a bucket over a piece of food after you have the animal seeing it, they would still be aware that it's there even though it's underneath the bucket. And we're going to explain why animals develop that cognitive ability way faster than humans. With memory, this is time. Time starts with memory. If you understand how memory works, means that you're thinking of the past. You remember, you reminisce, and therefore you're thinking of the past. But with that additional cognitive ability, you're able also to add future. So now you can remember the past and anticipate the future. And with that comes the sense of time. And that adds another dimension to your awareness. Now you're more aware of potentiality, of things that you can achieve through prospects, of thinking of the future, and even reminiscing of the past, because you can then draw experiences and do things differently if given a second chance. So a lot more depth in that awareness journey and consciousness journey is adding up. Delayed gratification, that's another psychological term of the ability to, and religion plays on that, because it's your ability to resist immediate reward for even a bigger reward later on. Chicken can actually do that. If you train chickens to resist having a smaller meal in exchange for a bigger meal later on, they will actually refrain from having that smaller meal. And we display that in different ways. But this is actually been witnessed in the animal kingdom, when even delayed gratification can be displayed if they understand that there will be a bigger reward later on. But that is the ability of an animal to forecast. That is forward thinking, that's futuristic thinking, and therefore that's also time. But it's So these.
I've got animals. They don't do it that way, really.
Right.
Now.
No, fair enough. So these are, and I will put some references later on. I can put some references. These are, everything that's been uttered here would have a psychological academic reference of peer-reviewed paper where these experiments took place.
Sorry, the dog's losing.
But it's a good point, because there are a lot of claims out there, and people are claiming all sorts of things. And if you are a charming person, and people would tend to believe you. But then I think you should just believe things that are peer-reviewed and have been scientifically verified. So it's a very good point that you would actually argue, how do I believe what you're saying? And you don't have to. The western scrub jay, that's a bird. This bird here has the ability to think forward. They can actually stash away food in difficult times, so they can actually have that reservoir of food later on when there's none. But they have very, very interesting little habit as well. They would hide food, and if they find another bird looking at them while they're hiding the food, they'll wait until that bird disappears, and they will hide it in a different place. So this is a bird that's not just displaying awareness of the future, but of also other like creatures and what they see the world like. So they being in somebody else's shoes, because that is a very, very, very big step towards consciousness. Being aware of what other organisms or beings are trying to achieve as well, and you're trying to do two things, because it will lead to two things. Whether you can outsmart them as a competitor, or you can actually empathize with them if they're friends. Because being in their shoes does not just trigger nasty habits of hiding things away, but if you feel empathy for that animal for whatever reason, being next of kin, or sexual selection, or all sort of things that's still at play in terms of evolution, you can still share some food with them if you choose to. But that is very important, because understanding how other people think, or how other animals think, that is very important in terms of getting to that qualia of, the hard problem of I'm thinking that I'm thinking that I'm thinking that I'm thinking, which is a difficult one to think about. So this is my presentation on consciousness. So I've argued that in search for food and energy, we had to adopt and be smart and develop tools to find food in a better way. And on the way of doing so, consciousnesses have emerged through very, very small steps of being a little bit aware of your surroundings, all the way to the hard problem of consciousness that we are trying to talk about today. Daniel Dennett doesn't reckon it's a hard problem. He reckons it can be explained away. He actually does not think it exists in the first place. He thinks consciousness is not real. It's an interface of a computer that is so complex, and in order to simplify the very complex processes in the background, it puts in front of you an interface that's your laptop, desktop, where clicking a Word or Excel icon will take you to where you are, but it doesn't show you really what really happens in terms of algorithm and the binary systems at play. And that's what consciousness is doing. It's actually simplifying the world in front of you. And that's why red doesn't exist. Colors don't exist. There's no such thing as a red apple. That is what we think the apple is. The apple takes all the colors from light, and it does not emit the color red. Then it's not even, the ontology of the apple isn't red. That's how we perceive it, and it's good for indexing. It's good for other things, but it's not real. But it doesn't matter, because we're not victims of that illusion. We are the beneficiaries of that illusion. So we can go to the next one, please. Now, this is a very interesting one, because morality is an area where a lot of ideas have taken monopoly on. Religion be one, maybe nationalism, maybe all sort of human tendencies, where a group of people will try to hoard morality to be their own. Like, well, morality started with Judaism. In the Ten Commandments, this is where God first uttered the moral things for humanity to do, even though the first 4 commandments has nothing to do with morality whatsoever. But that's the argument, and it actually works. So don't get me wrong, even though I'm an atheist, but I think I'm not an anti-theist. I believe religion has actually worked so wonderfully for quite some time when the tools of epistemology were lacking, and you did not evolve to learn the truth. You evolved to gather around a big idea that will encourage the group to stay in during a rainy winter, and that was enough. But it can be an obstacle at some point where the tools and the verification methods have evolved. So that hyper agency detection is still with us, but I think it's going away a little bit more. But morality is a very interesting one, because then religion is taken and say, oh, well, actually we are the source of morality, but is this? But we can't help but sort of discussing, why do we have that urge? When you see somebody who's poor, sitting on the street, and they're maybe cold, and bare, and it's great, you'd want to give them a helping hand, you'd want to give them a jacket if you've got one. Why do we have that urgency to help others? Even though evolution, if you read Richard Dawkins, we're talking about the selfish gene. I think it's misunderstood what he meant by selfish. But the selfish gene is talking about certain things that should not yield altruism. Where is the urge of helping others come from if we're only evolved to help ourselves, to survive? Because it could be mean your demise if you're helping someone else. But there is an answer. Why do you care about recycling plastic when no one is looking? And you won't even survive until climate change is here, and you want to just enjoy, you're a selfish person, you just want to enjoy the next 40, 50 years, because it might take a bit longer for that problem to arrive, and that's not going to be a problem anymore. But we still care. Why?
You haven't lived in a share house.
Say again, sorry?
You haven't lived in a share house, that's all I can say.
You don't say anything about the feeling of the goodness that comes.
Oh, it's coming. So trust me, it's coming in this conversation. Definitely. It is a very, very important item that I'm going to be talking about in the next few slides. Well spotted. So again, I'm going to give a very simple definition of what's morality, because it's always a very good thing when you talk about anything in this life is you give a definition first, because I could be talking for 2 hours and your understanding of morality is different than mine. So I am going to redefine morality in a very, very simple form. It's when you incur a cost in order to benefit someone else other than yourself. Simple as that. And it can be the magnitude of that particular cost. It can vary. It can be from all the way from you being on a flight, and there's an elderly lady, and you're just going to help her putting the sort of luggage above her head. Or it could be saving your next door neighbor from drowning, and therefore you're probably threatening or risking your own life by trying to help somebody else. So they can vary. Both of them are moral, but in different sort of grades and levels. So that's what I mean by morality, is doing something else for somebody, and it will cost you something in return. Thank you. Now, this is going to get quite interesting. We're going to get back into a bit of science here. Any of you know what a homeotherm is? A homeotherm is a warm-blooded animal. It's an animal that can sustain warmth through metabolic systems, like metabolism. You actually have to eat food, retain energy to keep your body temperature above surroundings. That wasn't the case for reptilian life forms. So that's before 200 million years, and we call it ectotherms. Ectotherms are anything that is cold-blooded. We're talking about reptiles, and you always see them in the daytime trying to sunbathe and trying to recover that sort of heat to regulate their body temperature. But therefore, they don't eat at night. They're hiding at night. They're hiding when it's really cold. You got hibernation, all sorts of things, because they cannot sustain body temperature. During evolution, 200 million years ago, something has changed, and the emergence of homeotherm animals have evolved on planet Earth. And this is a fantastic thing. It's good news for animals, because these animals can now have an open buffet day and night. They can eat day and night. They don't have to worry about regularizing their body temperature, because they can do it through food and through energy. However, just like anything in evolution, there's always a trade-off. You win something, you lose something. So you won the ability to eat day and night, but you lose the ability to eat way less. A reptile can eat something and don't have to eat for months or weeks later on. And they can do that. A mammal, gram for gram, a mammal or a homeotherm will have to eat 10 times more than an ectotherm to survive. So that causes an ecological pressure. Again, evolution has got to respond here. So what do these animals need to do to be able to find 10-fold the amount of food? They need to get smarter. How do you get smarter? More neurons, brains getting bigger. We know that the brains have got bigger, even with human species. Nervous system gets more complex, a lot more neurons and synapses are being added on. That's all good, but it's going to be very, very costly to do it instantly. So what do? Have that system laid down so they mature and be scheduled at a later on stage. What's that mean? It means that a turtle, when it lays its eggs on the shore of a beach, you might have 300 to 400 eggs hatching. Maybe 10% of them will survive because all the predators will come, the iguanas and the hawks will come and grab these turtles. And there's absolutely no relationship between mother and offspring here. They're off to fend for themselves, and their learning curve is instant, very quick, very narrow. A turtle in the first 2 minutes will have to learn probably 90% of the skills that it needs to hone for the rest of their life very, very, very quickly. But that'll be it. They don't have to learn much after that. Once they make it to the sea and they survive, there might still be a predator, a prey for some other predator in the sea, but at least they get to put their foot in the water. While in mammalia, it's a different story. With this particular neuron system being adjusted in a way that it will mature and will be scheduled later to mature later, it means that an intelligent adult will have to look after the offspring. And the offspring will get smarter, but later. And the response to that would be, it will be a slow start for a mammal to learn, but the learning curve is way steeper. It's a lot bigger. What a baby rat or a monkey or a human will learn over their lifespan is a lot more deeper, and even with the brain's plasticity in humanity, the sky is the limit, because every time you learn something new synapses are formed in the brain, and they do wonderful things. So this is what happened to the mammals. It's now the intelligent adult will look after the offspring, the smaller ones. Now, there is a couple of contrasts that I want to draw here. The first reptilian life, their nervous system is designed upon one thing, to do one thing, to look after yourself. Remember, the mother of a reptile doesn't care too much for the offspring. They have to fend for themselves. There is no bond, there's no tie between mother and offspring. The nervous system was designed for one thing only, is to sustain the organism that has this particular nervous system. But when the re-engineering of the nervous system have evolved to include mammals, and the intelligent adults will have to look after their offsprings, their nervous system, for the first time, instead of just me, has to include me and mine. So the adult mammal will have to look after itself and after its offspring in terms of feeding and making sure they're safe and secure. Just to answer the question on religion, whether religion has anything to do with morality, put that to bed once and for all. It's very straightforward. Homo sapiens, the last Homo sapien was found, the most recent was in Morocco, we used to think it was between 150 to 200,000 years. The one discovered in Morocco just recently is 300,000 years old. So we reckon to date, Homo sapiens, who we belong to right now, this is the current genus that we belong.
Morocco, what?
Sorry.
Morocco, what happened in Morocco?
In Morocco, they found the oldest remain of a Homo sapien, and that's where we think the age of Homo sapien is now about 300,000 years old.
We can hear you much better than this.
Yeah, I'll probably have to adjust the camera because I'll be very, very close to the camera. But what I can do is I can do this. Okay, so is this better? Much better? Okay. I'm sorry. I'm very I like to move a lot around, and I need to stabilize myself in front of you. So that was 300,000 years ago when we found the oldest Homo sapien where we think we belong. This is the genus that we belong at the moment. So if humanity started 300,000 years ago, and we think that the oldest of religions, I'm not talking about Abrahamic religion now, I'm going to talk about the precursor of all religions, which is the age of agriculture, when we settled down and we start to form colonies, and we got food secured and shelter, and we started to look at the sky and say, what the hell is that? And this is where it was more like the feminine religions and gods emerged about 10,000 years ago. So if religions only started 10,000 years ago, and morality is a social system that secure the survival of the human species, how did we survive for that long before morality being first introduced by religion? So it can't possibly have been introduced by religion. Religion have captured it, have built upon it, claimed it their own, and have provided some very helpful hints. So they have helped morality, but it's not its source. And even some religious people will argue that. They might say, well, some Muslims would say, well, God has actually stamped your heart with the code of morality. So it's a metaphysical argument that it cannot be proven nor disproven. So I'm going to argue, no, morality is pre-existed religion by law. So therefore, there must be an infrastructure deep in the biology of the human systems that will secure morality. And the argument is, once the nervous system 300 million years ago got very sophisticated, and the adult of an intelligent animal has to look after not just itself, like before in the reptilian realm, but also after other beings, being the offspring. This is a relationship between yourself and someone else, and that's the precursor of morality. Because once you expand that relationship to smaller family, the slightly bigger family, the group, the next of kin, the village, the country, the continent, the world, you can see where this is going. It's the next step.
Morality or self-interest?
So say again, sorry?
Morality or self-interest?
No, morality. Morality which is looking after other people.
Isn't it kind of the same? Self-interest is the same?
No, because remember, we defined morality as the cost for you that you incur helping somebody else other than you. So it can't possibly be self-interest. No, remember, there are different definitions of morality, and there's schools of philosophies that it depends. Are you consequentialist? Are you utilitarian? Are you a divine command theory? There are so many different morality theories out there. But that's why I've redefined it in the simplest of forms. You're doing something for somebody else that has cost you something. That simple.
It makes you feel good. So that's self-interest. Yeah. It makes you feel good to help.
I am going to get into that. You're making a very good point. You're making a very good point, but we're not aware of it. But you're making a good point. When you're doing it, you're not expecting something in return, but you do get something in return. And I'm going to explain it in a second. You're right. But
we've got evidence now of Neanderthals looking after each other when they've had broken bones and things. They had to have been dependent on their fellows or altruism. Now, let's go back 30,000 years or so. We've got Mungo Man, who's like 40,000 years or so. Surely, some Aboriginal belief has to be called some sort of religion of it. 50,000 or more, so a lot more than 10,000, sure.
Absolutely, I agree. I think it's to about 200 million years ago. That's what I'm trying to argue. Yeah, for sure. That's exactly what I'm trying to argue. That is way earlier than the introduction of religion, or even thoughts, because we are going to be discussing where does it come from. If there is a universal platform that we started from, when did it start? And the argument was, as soon as your nervous system was geared to look after somebody else other than yourself, being the mammals, and the mammals is obviously the breast. We're talking about a mom breastfeeding its offspring. And we're going to talk about some opioids that gets produced in the brain to facilitate that and enact the pleasure and pain systems. These are very powerful. But religion is out of the way in terms of being the originator of morality. However, it helped morality. It added some realm to it. It added some sort of glue. It advanced it in some certain areas. Maybe it's actually retarded in other areas, but it did interfere and interact with it. But it did not originate morality. Did not originate with religion. That is obvious. Okay, next one. So what is the true source of morality then, if not religion? I'm going to argue one more time that social behavior that we call morality has originated and emerged as an evolutionary response to an issue about food, which is basically what we said in the very beginning. The cold-blooded animals were trying to evolve better ways of looking for food, and we go from ectotherm, cold-blooded, to warm-blooded, and the warm-blooded has the ability to eat day and night. They don't have that restriction anymore. So in search for food, one more time, just like we did with consciousness, we stumble upon areas of evolution that is taking us in a way where morality is evolved. Because at the end of that particular spectrum, you're talking about a nervous system that was re-engineered to look after not just yourself and your self-interest, but for others. So we talked about that last bit before about the homeotherm, so we can skip that one here. We talked about the learning curve, so the trade-offs. There are trade-offs. A baby turtle will learn very fast, but will have very, very little to learn over its lifetime. And it's the other way around for mammals and warm-blooded animals. They will have to learn later on. Their neuron systems will mature later on. They're born immature, and it will happen later on at a scheduled stage. And that particular nervous system, instead of just going from me, it now will include me and mine. So we're going to be including now the pain and the pleasure systems. There's and the lady here up front. What's your name again? Sorry, your name? Yeah, Raphael. You made a very good point, and you said, "Well, it feels good to do something nice," and that's true. And that is because that bondage between mother and offspring needed to be glued together using some drugs that gets produced directly in the brain. And that drug is called oxytocin, or the hugging and the love drug. There is a drug that's usually, it's an abundance between mother and offspring at the time of breastfeeding. And that flows, and that is persistent in all, especially in humanity, but also some of the mammals as well, where the bond between mother and offspring will be emphasized through a pleasure system and the production of the oxytocin hormone within the brain. And as a result as well, if you separate mother from offspring, Level of oxytocins will get way less, and you actually will use stress and therefore pain. So that's the pleasure and pain principles being applied through naturally produced hormones in the brain. We are not aware of it. We just feel good, but we don't know why we feel good. You know, when you help somebody who's a little bit poor and you look over your shoulder and you see them smiling in the back and you just feel good for the day, you just go back to work and you feel really good, you know, and you know, you just feel good and you don't know what happened there. Yes, but it depends. And we talked about moral, you know, acts. So if helping a poor person might help for 10 minutes, have to make sure this camera follows me. But then probably bigger moral acts will last for a year. If you save somebody from drowning or you save a whole village, you know, so it depends. The bigger the moral acts, the longer the influence of that particular act. Here's another cute little animal called the prairie vole. Those prairie voles, and unlike the mountain voles, they are monogamous. They mate for life. And it's not just them. There are other species like the TT monkeys and the California deer mice. These are some of the species that are monogamous and mate for life. So once they found a partner, they just there, they mate for life. They make sure that when the female partner is away looking for food, they're making sure that they're actually with the offspring, looking after them. So they mate for life. And this is where science discovers something quite interesting. What happens there? Why are some animals are monogamous and some animals are not? Are we supposed to be monogamous? It's an interesting question. A lot of people argue maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we're acting against nature. No, nature includes monogamous couples and not just humans. But why is that? Why are some animals have the urge to stay only with one partner for the rest of their life? And the answer again was the oxytocin. Oxytocin sits on receptors in the brain and it gets expressed and distributed depending on whereabouts in the brain it is. And they found in monogamous animals, such as the prairie voles, that the oxytocin receptors are emphasized in areas where a single relationship is formed. However, in another animal like a baboon, that particular chemical receptor and the oxytocin is sitting at a group level, not a partner level. So they are happier when they are within the group, the tribe of baboons, but not necessarily the partner. The other animals that are monogamous, those particular receptors are sitting exactly where monogamous relationships are formed. So again, it doesn't seem like it's a matter of choice. It's a matter of how you've evolved and where your brain chemicals are allocated in which areas that will dictate your behavior, pretty much.
So a human's monogamous?
Yes.
But they're not all humans are monogamous.
Yes, because again, humanity is a very interesting one here, because I think with the journey of the brain, your brain, the human brain, is made of three parts. The reptilian brain, which is the back of the head, that's called the ancient brain, that controls desires, sex, food, and things like that. You've got the middle brain, which is the area that controls emotions and bondings and families. And you've got a new area that only evolved about 2 million years ago, which is the cortex, the frontal cortex. And this is the biggest. Humans have the biggest ratio of that particular area. That's newly evolved. This is where your logic, your cognitive functions are, and your moral judgments, and lots of other things that evolve. Humanity has reached a certain brain size that enables it to do certain things that other animals can't do, including second guessing what nature, and sometimes overriding what nature dictates. That's why we do certain things that seems to be outside of the scripts. Even though if nature writes a script, we've got now the hardware and the software to manipulate the very nature of things. Very interesting. This might be a different color lecture, but humanity is a very unique in terms of but again, it's all connected. Nothing is supernatural. still connected to the size of the brain and what the brain can do. So it's all in the hardware. So we're looking at the human brain as well, that pain and pleasure systems are all over the place in the brain, and emphasized as well in collaboration and cooperation. So they found that the oxytocin is sitting around receptors where the areas of cooperation and collaboration between human groups are together. So whenever you remember USA for America, the song by Michael Jackson and the group of people, We Are the Children, you know, the song, it was a wonderful song with Cyndi Lauper and lots of other singers, and it was a beautiful moment. It was a really good song. There was a lot of people involved, and people say, yeah, it's time to do something. Are people starving? I remember the Stevie Wonder, I think the opening statement was, there are people dying and it's time to lend a hand. So we felt good about it, and that collaboration is very emphasized. That's why I think we've survived for all these years. We don't have claws, we don't have big teeth, we're not strong as oxen, but we've got ourselves to collaborate and do gigantic projects together. I think this is one of the things that humanity can do, is that collaboration bit that we can do way better than any other animal for now. We're animals, by the way. In biology, in taxonomy, we are classified as animals. We are under kingdom Animalia so we are animals, but some people don't like to hear that, but we are animals. Next slide, please. I think that's the last one. Yeah, brilliant. So this is the time for questions now. Thank you.
Before we have questions, we collect some money for the church.
Yes, please. You want to announce it? Yeah.
Yeah, we're just going to collect some money for the Unitarian Church before questions.
I'm going to just do a couple of questions that might be in there. So I'm just going to announce it as well on my YouTube channel. So the people watching us on YouTube right now, if they want to write down their questions, I'm going to display them on the screen, and I am going to answer them if I can. Sure, please go ahead.
I'm going to be pretty smart, right? Because I know how to avoid predators. And presupposes I know about fear, I know about predation, I know what a predator looks like, I know what it was, something else. Now, that's all already a level of consciousness built into something as opposed to not having one. That's my first point, right? Second point, I exclude myself from this thing. I don't breathe. I don't reproduce. So I can't breathe. That's your criteria, right? Anybody who's infertile or celibate or not a good criteria. Yeah, that's basically it. I don't know, I think I'm missing out on something.
Very good questions. Okay, predations. There is a genetic memory. So if you are a prey that has been preyed upon, or being sort of followed by a predator, and you escape that predation, you start building a memory out of how best to run away from predators. So you have that experience.
The ones that didn't run away with it, so they don't pass anything on.
Correct, but some will run away.
The ones that didn't, but they did.
Correct, and therefore they're out of question. They're no longer in the evolution. They're gone. They're extinct. But those who were able to evade, that's why the evolution between the cheetah and the gazelle. The cheetah and the gazelle will always evolve in a way, in an equilibrium. The cheetah will get faster, but the trade-off is fragile bones. If a cheetah breaks a bone, they're gone. They can't do anything. And also they can run for a very short burst of time. They cannot do like what bulls can do. They can do probably 2 or 3 minutes of really, really fast speeds, but that's about it. And then the gazelle would actually, especially the springbok would actually, was argued, the one especially that springs in the air while being chased. And so why the hell did, I think Christopher Hitchens mentioned that once before, and they said, why the hell do they waste time by jumping in the air? And it says, well, they're actually sending a message to the cheetah saying, well, I'm a very agile deer. You might want to look for somebody else. I'm going to escape no matter what.
We reverse engineering and looking at it and trying to explain it for ourselves. Necessarily.
Well, it is forensic science, isn't it? I mean, we are reflecting, we're trying to make what is the most, natural explanation. But yes, we don't know for sure. Yeah, it's fair to say.
So the development of morality, you're saying, which I totally agree, is very much a product of longer and longer childhoods and much more investment of parenting and long-term relationships. But that also means that morality is nowhere near confined to humans. But all animals, put any investment in parenting, have at least some sort of beginning of some sort of moral structure, because otherwise they wouldn't raise their children.
Absolutely.
Parenting is morality.
Absolutely.
But that's instinct, that's not morality, that's called instinct.
No, it's not. Parents have to sacrifice a great deal of their instant pleasure to give things to their children to make sure their children outlive them.
Yes.
There's a cost, which is what Annie was saying.
It's just wanted to go to charity. Of psychopathy and those on the spectrum that might know right from wrong, but just don't care. They behave in a certain way, regardless of how they're being brought up. It's almost like some kind of brain disorder, disease. It's simply that's outside your scope of caring,
Natural selection does not guarantee that every member of the species develops equally. Some do, some don't. Variability is the essence of natural selection. Those which are incapable of passing on good qualities get excluded.
So we're talking about in terms of people with psychological disorders or chemical imbalance. They've always been around. They're not bigger than 3% of the population at all times. 3 to 5% population. They're there, and if the chemicals are not firing in the right places, let's say about bipolar, or that is the very reason. So we're saying that the brain is responsible for all these tendencies, including cooperative behavior. And if somebody is a sociopath or a psychopath, on the back of their, and that's another conversation, free will and the repercussions of not having free will, because I don't think we do have it. But what do we do now? We know that we don't have free will. I think the answer is very obvious. The brain and what you are born with is pretty much what's going to dictate how you're going to be behaving going forward on the individual level and the group level.
Did you say we have free will or we don't?
No, we don't. I don't think we do.
It's debatable.
It's debatable, but I'm a compatibilist. So I know that we don't have it, but I still going to, if somebody's going to be offering me tea or coffee, I might spend 5 minutes thinking, what should I have? So I still fall into the trap of free will. Please go ahead.
Two interlinked problems with definitions. The definition of morality is rather wide, I could say, in that if it's simply sacrificing for the benefit of others, well, I mean, bees do that. And except maybe those so-called anarchist hives where the social control, I mean, there's a bee in an ordinary hive, a moral bee, and a bee in an anarchist hive, an immoral bee.
Okay,
So that's with regards to the definition of morality. The definition of, you didn't give a definition of religion, but I think it must be rather narrow if you're only taking it back 10,000 years. I mean, you're obviously excluding Neanderthal burials, you're excluding rock art that goes back 20,000 years. And the whole, like, the fact that we had different human cultures for a lot longer than 10,000 years ago, is there some kind of diffusion of religion? I mean, what is your definition of religion,
So
basically?
I'm sticking to the academic definition of a religion, which is an organized idea based on a deity and ritualistic. Any era that predates that particular, so let's say the magical era, where people sort of believed in bad spirits and use sacrifices to appease these spirits, or the potentiality of something bigger than us. So this is slightly, that is still outside of religion. That may be a precursor of religion I would use, but I would not use as the organization of religion. It's been academically established that the start of a proper religion, as we define it academically, is the agriculture era, when people have actually settled down and we've secured food and shelter.
That sounds kind of 19th century to me. I mean, like indigenous Australian culture, religion, I mean, is it to be called religion?
But see, there's no such thing, and this is where the problem with morality. Words, we give things words. There is no ontology to the word morality. There is no such thing up there. It's called morality up in the sky, and we're discovering it. There isn't a thing we call that's religion, and we're discovering it. We classify terms as we see what we want to make distinctions between a precursor of religion and what we want to call religion. So we put some rules. It's exactly like taxonomy of the classification of animals. Some animals will be classified based on their genetic makeup, some will be on their look, some will be on their characteristics, and there's actually debate. So that's like any endeavor in the humanity. Names are not intrinsic to things. We just give them, and we might disagree. We might just move it a little bit to include it or not to include it. Like virus. Are virus living organisms or not?
Okay, yeah,
You know?
answer that. But what discipline are you applying when you're using a definition of religion that basically requires a settled agricultural society, and a religious establishment that's with a priesthood and all that? I mean, okay, if you want to say that,
this is
which
agreed.
discipline?
This is agreed upon in academia and theology. So academic theology. Theology.
This is coming from theology.
Correct.
All right.
Not if you add anthropology, it might actually shift a little bit.
I reiterate, Australian Indigenous belief system. I mean, you get at least some theologians who will be happy to say Australian Aboriginal spirituality is religious.
And if we let's say we include that, so that will make the oldest religions about 40,000 years old.
We'll have to take it back that far.
Yeah, 40,000 years old. And then again, we're talking about the start of Homo sapiens about 300,000 years ago. The gap and the problem still remains. So even if we shift it now. Please go ahead.
Hunting and gathering communities usually involve fairly small, possibly extended family groups, and they've got obviously some sort of religious structure in the sense that they have long-term heritage like we do, and they have long-term relationships. Once you get settled village life, and you get thousands of people living close together, morality has to become a great deal more sophisticated.
Absolutely, I agree. That's the emergence of the priest class. They call it the priest class, the mediator between that particular group of people. Because we've gone from everyone in the cave or in that side of the river to suddenly living in a bigger group where you come across new faces that you haven't come across before, or extended families. And the priest class had to come here to apply the rule of the invisible deity, who would say, well, you can't really do that. Even if nobody can see you, you're still going to be punished by that deity, or that's going to be a taboo. And that is, again, that's another precursor of religion.
Where does that standard or that ruling come from?
Which rule? The rule
The
of...
rule that you said that the priest will lay down and say to the person, you can't do that. Okay, where does that rule come from?
This, we're going to have to use some forensic science here. We're going to have to infer whether that particular priest actually did believe in such a thing, and therefore was faithfully and honestly trying to portray what they believe to the group, or whether it was a pragmatic endeavor by somebody, by the first atheist. Say, well, I don't believe in God, but he's quite handy to use if I want people to act in a certain way. We're not quite sure, but I tend to think that everybody still have the hyper agency detection where people still believe in something supernatural. So I tend to believe that these shaman or priests believed in some higher power, but mixed it with a bit of pragmatism when applied certain rules to achieve certain results. Please go ahead.
Well, I'm very pretty much with your thesis about, animal gradual step-by-step evolution of consciousness and various things that follow from it, right? But the basic fact of animal life is kill or be killed. I mean, there's no reality whatsoever in that. I mean, this morning I get up, open the front door, hit a pile of cotton guts on my, there's a fact of life, right, on my front doorstep, right? My lovely little kitten. The most cute little thing, over and miles mouth, right? Killed 3 in the last week. Now, this is absolutely antithetical to the idea of, I don't really touch on it, really, of sympathy or empathy or basic morality, really. But if you were God, and you had to design a system which is going to be sort of self-perpetuating in some fashion, you might have it so that every animal dies of old age, right? That something comes along each body. Let's get the idea, read things. But when things are torn to pieces alive, and they're the most defenseless things, or some other thing that rips its guts open and eats it, I can't think of anything a lot worse than that in terms of basic, what we would call morality. So,
but that's the thing. Is a lion immoral when they are shredding a deer to pieces, or are they amoral? Because morality doesn't come. Remember, whenever there is an issue of survival, morality is suspended.
what is the usual survival? Male lions, right, will kill the cubs. There's some other lions, they're probably, there's no love lost between lions as such. On the other hand, when lions are attacking a herd of zebras or something, right, the zebra will run away and leave their unfortunate bloody colleague to its fate. But they just turn around and occasionally, very occasionally, see it happen. There's been Japanese tourists here, water buffalo. They just come back and the lions think, what's going on here? This isn't the script, we're now supposed to sort of fight back.
True.
So surely evolutionary theory would say they should in turn band together. There's there's force in numbers or safety numbers or whatever.
But that will lead, because the system's already wrong. I mean, in the presence of God, it's not wrong. In the presence of a loving God, then that's the essence of the problem of evil. That's gratuitous suffering for me, because the design itself is flawed. Remember, if they gather like that, that will be the extension of the animals that need to prey. Remember, that lion needs to go to beautiful cubs, the Lion King narrative. And if they don't eat themselves, they also will perish. So the whole thing is crude.
All the animals get on and the Lion King or something like that. But they push lemmings off cliffs to make them automatically happen. That's all bullshit.
Is that there's nothing wrong with the way humans treat the animals. Just one thing. In other words, we, for example, when we're talking about chickens, we would really look at the chicken on the first day of male chicken.
Yeah, what's right?
Yeah, or grind them up for a live, for dog food.
Not so moral.
So when we're talking about the behaviour of animals to each other, it's nothing worse than the way they think. Well, I think it's the way humans behave towards the animals themselves.
Well, abortion. I mean, okay, the criteria for thinking, no, not thinking, are they conscious? No. Can they reproduce? Not for about 20 years. So look at it. No problem here.
Yeah, so we should stick a new one.
Just a point on language. When you said red is not real, I would disagree. Red is real.
Okay, what is, because I'm not talking philosophy, I'm talking science.
Okay.
Red is not real because it doesn't actually exist in the
If we say red, you could claim that it's not objective, but I would claim it's certainly a real experience.
Okay, okay. So if we're going to go to
It could be subjective.
Yes.
You can say it's subjective. It's not an actual object. It's not actually objective. Well, this is philosophy. If you're going to deal with science,
yes, but
you need a terminology.
But I respect it because we live in a subjective world. So yes, objectively speaking, there is no such thing as red. But I will still go to a supermarket and I'll still, should I go for red apples or yellow apples? That's how we think.
My central point is subjective experiences are still real, although they're not objective. Oh, sorry, let me speak. That's the point. I think it's just very important to get the terminology correct.
I agree, because a psychiatrist who's treating a patient who is under the belief that they have possession, they believe they're obsessed by demons. The psychiatrist would objectively kind of know that there is no such thing, being sort of verified over and over again. Yet the person suffering is utterly convinced that this is what's happening to them. And it will be quite horrible if you treat them in such a way that, sorry guys, stop, these things don't exist. You can't, you'll lose your license. You would actually have to treat it differently, because you're right. Subjective experience, whether they're true or not, they actually
whether they're objective.
Whether they're objective or not, they're still happening, they're still suffering. So you got to treat them slightly different. I would not invoke science. I would invoke human empathy. I would invoke camaraderie and friendship and other human disciplines. That's why, even though I like science, but I don't think it's the answer to everything. There are certain things still we have to navigate in a humanitarian way. Please go.
One of the things that Diane Fossey learns in her study of gorillas is that when a male gorilla captures a female that has young ones already, it will kill the young ones and get the female pregnant. But once the female has had her child, the male gorilla is an amazing father and gives a huge amount, because the interest of the male gorilla is to raise its young to be competent members of adult society. That's essentially what morality is about. Sacrificing your own momentary interests to raise children who will become competent adults and useful members of the community.
But that's not the real reason why a gorilla would kill the offspring of another. I think the real reason.
Their own genes.
Yes, I think that's the real reason.
I think the word morality is not the only thing that's going on. There's still male to male competition. I want my genes to survive into the long-term future. Don't care a bit about your genes. But once my child is here, I will look after it magnificently.
Yeah. It's a dicey one, and that's why I think morality, if we look at it as a tool of survival, it's a social contracts that we keep building with each other. We could look back in 400 years upon ourselves and imagine back in the 21st century, people used to slaughter animals to eat their flesh, and we would look at ourselves and say, what the hell were we thinking? It will move with time. It will move with knowledge, with more knowledge. A few hundred years ago, we didn't think animals had any feelings. Therefore, they were not sentient beings, and we can do whatever we want. And now we understand that they're suffering, and then trigger on lots of people to choose different diets. And even if they are pushed to eat meat, how are they going to eat their meat? Are they going to, encourage batteries and horrible practices like that?
Many years ago, I joined an orangutan project in southern Kalimantan in Indonesia. And one of the things I learned was an adult orangutan has to be able to recognise about 400 different food sources. How does it learn those? It has a childhood of about 6 or 7 years when it stays with mum. And mum's job is to teach it, this is safe to eat, that is not. This is something that fruits, and this is how you pluck it, this is how you peel it or eat the peel or whatever. So it has to do a huge amount of teaching. And that's the basis for a lot of the moral relationship between mother and child.
Well, this has been argued in Steven Pinker's book, The Clear Slate, the Tabla Rasa. It's been argued now on the genetic level, there are certain skills that get passed on a genetic level. Babies are afraid really of snakes.
can't hear you.
Sorry. Babies are afraid really of snakes. So Steven Pinker is arguing there's no such thing as a tabula rasa, or the blank slate. We are born with certain genetic codes that have inherited traits that sort of prepare us, minimal information that will help us to survive. Baby humans are afraid of snakes, and they've never had an experience of snakes before, but that's transferred in a genetic code. They can swim at the age of a week or a few days and swim quite professionally, and then be afraid of water a few years later because of some social constructed dilemma or an incident. So it's fascinating, but I think on the animal level as well, there will be some information transferred on the genetic code to at least give that animal that particular precursor that would enable them to do so later on. Yeah, we'll take Ron, please.
Look, to be honest, I find this attempt to find an objective rationale to support any kind of ethical principle extremely dangerous, because it's going to give the person that believes in that ethical principle a notion that there's something profoundly right about that, and by implication that somebody who's got a different one is profoundly wrong. And so you're sort of talking about a kind of fanaticism to me.
Ubermensch.
No, I hope not. No, not the Ubermensch of Nietzsche, of course. But no, because I am going to be suggesting that, and this is Patricia Churchman, if you want to hear her conversations about, that on the back of this knowledge, we ought to not to change a thing. We'll still have to debate ethical issues the way we've always had. We sit down in a group, we talk about what is better for us. Understanding where you come from does not mean necessarily dictates where you need to go. It's just an understanding of the foundation of what gave rise to morality, or that tool that we call today morality. We'll still, on the back of this, we'll have to go to a philosophy class and understand that the different school of ethics and morality. A Tesla car that's being developed, we'll still have a committee of people who would say, if this car is going to crash into somebody, would it crash into the baby, the old woman, the man on the crutches? Who would it kill, or who would it hit first? So the repercussion of this is nothing. We're just understanding where it's come from, and we will continue talking about morality the way we always have. Talk to each other.
I mean, you say you're going to debate these, matters, but in philosophy, a lot of the time you just simply have to agree to disagree. That's it.
Yes, you can. You can.
I'm suggesting that happens, fairly frequently.
Oh yes. I mean, if you go to morality, you go to Saudi Arabia or Iran, well, morality is something completely different than the Copacabana beach on Brazil. If a lady sitting in a bikini in Iran, that would come from. I mean, we've seen that lady who got killed just by removing her head cover. So morality, we know it's relative as we speak. Morality has been relative in the Bible, in the holy text. God was very, very upset by the enslavement of the Jews in Egypt. Yet when they were out, they were okay to enslave others by creed of God. So it's always been relative.
Aren't you just replacing God with evolutionary biology?
No, I'm just understanding where it's come from. We wanted to understand the underpinning. It's universal. My suggestion saying this tool that we call morality does not belong to a color, to a race, to a certain species, to a certain era. It's inbuilt from the very beginning. We all have the tools to make moral judgments. So I'm taking it way back beyond race and religion and everything else to be a common ground for mammals, which we have come from.
I'll tell you about one little mammal that really interests me very much, which is the vampire bat. Vampire bats go out and make a little incision in the hoofs of donkeys or cattle or whatever, and lick the blood, and then they go back to their roost.
And they give
where
it
they've
back
got
to
the young ones.
Yes.
And they regurgitate
Yes.
some of their blood. When the young ones are left by the mothers, they're very vulnerable. And so they elect a creche mother to not go out and feed, but look after the babies.
Yes.
And the creche mother therefore doesn't get to feed on her own blood. And so the mothers that did go out and bring back blood feed the creche mother.
Yes.
It's one of the really interesting studies of altruism
Yes.
in a non-human species.
Yes.
You do something for me, you look after my kid, I'll do something for you, I'll bring back food for you.
And that's a beautiful word. And I even better than altruism for me, reciprocal altruism, which is that.
And Bertrand Russell would call it enlightened self-interest.
Yeah.
So vampire bats understand enlightened self-interest. They're believers.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask a question about language. Now, I'm of the school that thinks the whole idea that the other apes can form sentences and paragraphs, for that matter, is utter tosh. I think it's exclusive to the human ape.
Language,
Yes.
absolutely. What held the emergence of consciousness the way it's been perceived that language, most psychologists now would talk about language as not a tool to provide communication. It was actually a tool of thinking. You can think of complex and abstract. Math is one of those languages. Here we've got a champion of math. It's very similar thing. There are certain things if you want to explore, the cosmology and math are well intertwined. There are certain things you cannot explain unless you have math. We'll explain an equation of how matter and energy is just the two faces of the same coin. According to Einstein, E equals mc squared, and math comes to explain it. And so does language. There are certain things, hypothetical statements, certain things that will only be possible with language. There's even a debate about how language dictates the thinking of a certain group of people. I think Finnish, the language Finnish, does not have a future tense. And that's based on a very old ancient tradition there. So language can actually mimic how a nation would think. Arabic is very poetic, very abstract, but it's not very rubbish when it comes to science. I struggle with my Arabic broadcast to find terminologies in Arabic that will actually reflect what I'm trying to say in science. I have to use either Greek or English for that sort of thing. And that's the evolution of, that's why I think languages are heading, I think the lingua franca of the world we live in at the moment. I think we can say English is the lingua franca because it's the language of business and science communication. And it was French at some point, before that was German, Greek, Latin. So the Arabic, the golden age of the Muslims, about 1,000 years ago, was quite prevalent, and Arabic was used then. So I think, yes, I do agree that language has a large role to play in the way we think. I speak a few languages, and yes, I can see myself thinking slightly different. Sense of humor changes when you tell a joke in a different language. Those of you who can speak different languages will understand what I mean. Raffaele, you've got Italian background? Come stai? So that will be, yeah, so I completely agree. All right, we've got a few questions that have come from the rational realm. So probably somebody you guys would have known from your conversations about the existentialist society as well. Hanny, many cold-blooded reptiles are also cooperate. Maybe not such a sharp distinctions between cold-blooded and warm-blooded. What do you think?
Can you enlarge it?
Yeah, make it a bit bigger.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah.
So he's asking that, well, reptilians still show a little bit of cooperation. It's not as detached as I made it out to be, which is true. Only I show that contrast because I wanted to show the contrast between, and it is vast between mammals and reptiles. But yes, even reptiles show a little bit of cooperation, not as emphasized in mammals, but hey, didn't we say that nothing comes out of the blue? Everything follows micro steps something that is coming from a simpler form. So if Mammalia, that kingdom, shows the hype of collaboration and cooperation, then the reptilians will still show a little bit of that, but not as emphasized. So I do agree.
Make a comment on that. I went to an exhibition a few years ago about dinosaurs in Launceston, and it was mainly built around communal nests of dinosaurs. They used to, the females that were laying eggs would quite often lay within a few metres of each other, and so they would actually help to look after each other's young while someone was off feeding, and there would be group protection. And there you have a very inchoate beginning of morality.
Yes.
I'll look after you if you look after me.
Absolutely.
I'll mind your kids just now, you mind my kids a bit later.
Yes.
I'll sacrifice something for the moment and do something for you, and you sacrifice something a bit later and do something for me.
Yeah.
It's not sophisticated, but it is
The precursor.
At the same time,
Yeah.
just a different degree.
I agree. I think things had humble beginnings and they get complex as you get further. I think that just that between from cold-blooded to warm-blooded is the biggest thing. That's why it's emphasized. This is a nervous system only geared to look after yourself, and maybe the occasional help here and there, to one that is full-fledged, that says me and mine for the first time. Please go ahead.
So is there a difference between instinct and intentionality?
There's a lot that you can drown in you can drown in the world of semantics. The words can mean different things to different people, but if you mean by what do you mean by morality? When I say moral, what comes into your head?
When you say what?
Moral. What is moral to you?
Well, you intend for something to be right, and primarily right for that situation.
But is it for somebody else?
Excuse me.
Whereas,
I'm actually correlating with what you're saying, because I was going to ask a question. When you stated that morality is relationship between you and someone else, and you touching on that, so you're ignoring the concept of individual morality. And you're totally focusing on the other person.
Yeah.
What about the individual
Well,
responsibility?
what can you define that? When Tom Hanks was cast away on that island on his own, when his FedEx airplane crashed into that island, and he was all by himself, was there morality? Can he be called moral or immoral?
Well,
Think about
well,
that.
As a Christian, obviously, I would have a totally different concept of that from everyone else here, but yes, I would believe that it's extremely important.
But so he's there on his own to fend for himself.
Oh, see, this is where the relationship between him and God and me and God.
Okay, that I cannot interfere with. Yeah.
But for me, and there are millions of Christians and perhaps Muslims, and this is an extremely important concept, and I think you ignore it at your peril.
I'm ignoring it because there is no, I can't find a proof for the existence of God to date. Yes.
You can't write it off.
Oh, no. I can't, because there could be other different type of gods that I don't know of. But at least the Abrahamic one I've discounted for now. I'm an ex-Muslim and ex-Christian, by the way.
I just want to say this, and that is, I will claim that morality requires an abstract notion of good and evil. So what's in animals, it's not morality. No. You might think it's something which later evolved into human morality. Fair enough. But think on this, an abstraction of good and evil. I can't show you a zoo animal that's good or a zoo animal that's evil. It's a generalized abstraction that's created in there.
Right. So that is an interesting concept because we're talking about where morality has reached humanity at this point. We are thinking of good and evil. See, but the problem is when you put it in context, what is good can be redefined to mean it's evil. So, for example, let's since we're talking about religion, when God helped Moses out of Egypt, which he says, God, no, I'm Egyptian as well, so no archaeological evidence whatsoever that Moses ever existed or was in Egypt. These were, a civilization that used to document everything. There's no such thing. But let's say this is an analogy, this is a story where God is going to try to teach humanity a good lesson. And the lesson is, do not enslave others. I've created you free. Do not enslave others. It's a brilliant story. And I wish God persisted with that and said, well, from this point on, humanity should not enslave each other. But when you go to Deuteronomy and you go to other pieces of the Bible where the Israelites are given license, not just to invade other nations like the Amalekites, but to slaughter them, kill their babies, and keep the virgins for themselves. And you can't help but wondering, is good here absolute or relative? Because one time in one place it was not good, because it was chosen people. The act was happening to his chosen people. But the other tribe, the Amalekites, were not the people of God, and therefore it was okay to do that to them. And yeah,
That's what I like to say.
Yes, of course it's relative. Good is relative.
unfortunately, it is. Yes. The lion that devours a deer, it's horrible for the deer. But if the lion doesn't do so, he will also starve as well as his cubs. So, what do you do? If I was God, if somebody here in this room was God, you would have created a system where your energy, because food is energy, you can abstract energy from other sources other than eating sentient beings. It would have been lovely.
So you've just said that we are animals.
Yes, we are. Yeah,
I am. I suspect you are too.
we are.
On the issue that Raphael was raising a little while ago, that instinct versus moral decision, one of the issues with the vampire bats is who gets to be the creche mother tonight. It's not the same one every night. They actually have a discussion about it.
Wow.
And it might be used tonight, and it might be used tomorrow night.
That's pretty
That
good.
involves decisions. It involves cooperative behaviour. You've probably all seen the meerkats at the zoo. One of them gets to be the sentry. And there's been lots of studies have done that show that the sentry gets to be the sentry for about an hour. Because while he's being sentry, he can't feed. So they've got a very good time sense, and after about an hour, one will come up and say, I'll take over. And the other one who's been the sentry goes off and has some food.
Yeah.
So again, that's not instinct. You can't invent an instinct that would do that. It's decision making and cooperative behaviour.
Yeah. Just I remember seeing that meerkats in patrol, when they have that one meerkat standing up doing the patrol, and they start falling asleep and getting drowsy, and the guy just taps them on the shoulder, saying, it's my turn, it's my shift, you go to sleep. So it does, it gets displayed in Animal Kingdom. It's wonderful to see. But with all these wonderful stories, you get to see these horrible stories of wildebeest being eaten alive. That's a scene that is just not right. I just don't understand.
They accuse people that are anthropomorphism. You're projecting the God-given powers that were exclusive to man on animals. See, there you are.
One of the things that Jane Goodall found in her studies of chimpanzees at Bombay was there was a chimpanzee she called Passion, which was part of a family whose names all started with P. Passion was mentally very, very unsound. She killed and ate the children of several other female chimpanzees, including her own. She was mentally sick.
You get
She
that?
was not a good member of that community.
Yeah.
So mental illness is not confined to humans.
Oh, absolutely. Epilepsy. You've got animals with epilepsy.
So she was an immoral chimpanzee in the sense that she could not function in a morally bound community.
Yeah.
She was an aberration.
Yeah, but that's why our understanding of our punishment has changed over the years. Back a few hundred years ago, when somebody does something completely wrong and doesn't go with the group, we used to get them, sometimes burn them to the stake, like witches, or any smart, independent woman would be sort of dubbed a witch, and you'd burn them. And there used to be people coming from the village, not even aware of what's going on, and they're taking part of throwing stones and apples. And you see that still in the Muslim world, where the horrible, horrible practice of stoning women to death for adultery. They bury them to their waist, and they bring people from the village who would not know this person from a bar of soap, and they'll start, throwing the stone until the person's dead. It is absolutely horrible. So we're Iran, some other, Sudan. There are some Sharia law run countries. Horrible stuff. The stoning of. But we're moving away from that by now understanding there are certain people that are born that way. If you have a problem with your prefrontal lobe cortex and it's damaged and you cannot feel some people cannot feel empathy. They actually cannot. They are unable to feel it. So
the problem with food.
But you learn it, don't you?
Sorry, say again?
You learn it. You're saying you're born with this gift.
Yeah.
It's something that's taught.
No, so that's a curse. I'm talking about having a damaged brain. The part of the brain that is damaged, the prefrontal lobe cortex and the amygdala, which it actually at the hardware level they're damaged, and that person is unable to display empathy. So, but what we do is instead of burning this person alive, and we don't do that anymore, what we do now is we eliminate them, put them away, put them aside. That's why the executions are in first world countries and better developed countries are no longer a thing. You put them away for the rest of their lives, or you put them in a psychiatric clinics, and you don't torture them to death like we used to in the past. So we have evolved to understand that there are certain people who cannot help what they're doing, and the answer is not to leave them, because some of the people would say, well, if we don't have free will, then nobody should be responsible of anything. That's rubbish. Yes, these people will still need to be stopped from hurting others, but the answer is not to put them, not to burn them alive, but just cast them away.
There's been a few in history that have controlled nations, aren't there?
Yes. Yeah.
I can't think of their names.
Please go ahead.
That's quite relevant. What we've done a few studies, people have, on fairness, on an animal's concept
Yes.
of what's fair and what's not fair.
Yes.
The classic one is you have a little shoot, push a button, the feeder comes out, now they're going into a rock or something, right? And they look at each other, and the guy that's getting the rock every time gets really bloody mad about it, though. He realises it's not fair. No one's getting treated the same. So somehow that concept of, there you go, which, I don't know how you work it out, but it's there.
The concept of fairness, it's actually been displayed in chimpanzees. They've done it before. They've got two groups of chimpanzees, and they've had them in two separate areas. They've given them both carrots, and they were very happy with the sweetness of the carrots. But then they stopped and started giving the other group like berries or even like a sweeter fruit. And the other group started banging on the cage, saying, well, what the hell are you doing? We want some of that sweeter stuff too. So that sense of fairness is actually displayed. Well, no wonder they are the closest cousin to us, 96.5%. It depends on, you're talking about coding or non-coding gene, up to 98.5% of similarity between chimpanzees and Homo sapiens, humans. So no wonder they are very, very similar, especially bonobos. Bonobos are even closer.
The other thing was the Russians tried breeding mink to be really, really savage or to be domesticated. We domesticated all sorts of things like mine and give you a sweet cat. You sit there and love a little thing in the night, it's written, bloody, full of possums and bits, and that's the way they are. It's not relative, what the hell it is, it's, compartmentalize their lives.
Well, in the pursuit of giving things name, we struggle a lot because we need to find a name for everything, even though sometimes the answer is, like Lawrence Krauss would say, just go back, go to sleep. There's no answer. Yeah.
That's where the reality comes in. They feel bad about it. Maybe their conscience, and what the hell is that? Makes them not do it. Okay? The net thing ought to be heading towards better rather than worse. But, what's the meaning of Putin in charge of something? And, it's a bad system.
Please go ahead in the back.
Consistency. We're very nice to our domestic animals. We have a law which says you can do anything you like to farm animals. There is no restrictions whatsoever.
I agree. Yeah. What if the twist of history had pigs as pets, and the dogs, like in China, is the animal to be slaughtered and eaten. What's the difference? Actually, a pig is smarter than a dog. So it's very, very, it's almost the luck of the draw sometimes. Sometimes you gotta think what has happened in the history for us to choose the dog over the pig. And, you know, it's all blurred.
You can put a pretty good case around not a moral species, but an immoral species.
I've been told, I don't know if it's true, that 3% of world's population are cannibal.
Cannibal. I think that's probably an exaggeration because we're talking about 3%, 8 billion. So we're talking about 20. Is that about 240 million people?
Yeah, probably were in the natural condition.
Yeah, 240 million people. That is the size, close to the size of the US. There are cannibals that we're not aware of. I find it hard to believe.
Well, very easy to believe. Maoris were cannibals, no two ways about it. Aboriginals were cannibals, no two ways about it. Very well documented, you don't believe it, you can very easily verify it. Most of the South Sea Islanders, long pig, good stuff. You know, so 3% seems a lot for you to me.
The problem with cannibalism.
Iroquois used to hunt people.
Yeah.
Go out with a specific point of getting other people to bring them back to eat them.
Yeah. Problem with cannibalism is not even displayed in the animal kingdom because cannibalism of eating own species would lead to the demise of the population of that particular species. So it cannot be widely practiced because if it's true, it would have meant that humanity would have not resisted for all of that.
Maybe it's not the thought, but it is a fact of life.
It might, yeah, I agree.
Really big time of cannibals.
But we know now we didn't eat the Neanderthal. The last Nobel Prize winner, the Swedish guy, we've actually mated with them. We made love.
Okay, I just want to correct language again. An immoral person is still a moral person. You're forgetting the word amoral. An amoral person does not have an idea of morality. An immoral person has an idea of morality. No, they have an immoral person is a person who does have moral values, but simply chooses to act against them.
Yeah, there will be incidents where a person will be amoral as an atheist without morals. Yes, if that person.
I'm separating immoral
Yes.
and amoral.
Yeah, I can see that. And to be honest with you, I cannot call somebody an immoral. If you look at today's movies, the way they are constructed, there is no such thing as pure evil or pure goodness. I think we're a mix of everything. I think you might call this is an immoral act, but you cannot really tell somebody you are actually fully immoral. Thanks very much. Thank you. To call somebody immoral just as a statement, Hitler is a horrible person. I'm sure he's done some good things. And where would that leave him?
So you're saying that Hitler was not immoral?
No, that's not what I'm saying. He's done a lot of. He's probably done some good things. He might have done good things before he got twisted. You know, remember, some people get like really turned around a certain point. Some people were like the Joker, the latest Joaquin Phoenix movie about the backdrop of the Joker and how the Joker was made to be an evil person, but he was being bullied at school. He was actually an all right guy, and society kept pushing him until he completely turned. So maybe at some point that person who is good before something has changed in them. So the absolute statement of calling somebody good or evil, I try to get away from. I know, but we can't help it because if we see a horrible act, we call that person colloquially that, but deep down we know that that person might have been okay at some point.
Which burning is a moral act?
Which
burning is a moral act?
You mean based on the conviction that these people were? Yeah, based on conviction. True. So that's why it's very difficult to judge people by the morality of their age. So if you say marrying younger children is a horrible thing right now, is because we know so much about the psychological and physiological and physical state of a young girl and should not be married. But when you go back and the life expectancy of a person was 30 years old, And if you don't, have a wife and an offspring and begin a family by the age of 15 or 16, you're probably screwed. So can you say, oh, they were all pedophiles back then? I don't think so. I think you ought to judge people by the morality of their age. However, there are certain things that are distinct. I think certain things like slavery, for example, I think we can say, well, that's probably because the other affected person is screaming loud and saying, please let me go. I'm not supposed to be here. Somebody's actually whinging and complaining about it. It should have been an indicator that it's not a cool thing.
But as far as you talk about Hitler, he always hated the Jews, and therefore killing them was the next step. He was evil.
Do you think he was, because do you know the background? He's actually Austrian, and he's actually, his mother.
That's right.
His mother was a Jew, and in Judaism, religion gets transferred with your mother, not your father. So he's actually a Jew himself.
Hitler, you're claiming his mother was Jewish.
Yes.
No, she's a Catholic.
Yeah, she was Catholic.
He was a Catholic. He was brought up Catholic, because this is where the debate where a lot of religious people would say, well, actually Hitler was an atheist, and therefore these horrible things were committed in the name of atrocity. I am going to be completely unbiased, because I will not say he's done that because he's religious either. I think he was just sick. I don't think religion dictated what he did, and I don't think atheism dictated what he did. I think he was just a horrible person. So I don't think, I know he's had the belt, the Nazi belt had on it, Gott mit uns in German, which means God with us, which indicates some sort of thing. He had wacky ideas about mixing some Germanic gods and Vikings with a lot of with Christianity. He was just different. But I don't think religion has anything to do.
He didn't believe in those religions. He was a Christian at one point. Hitler got his ideas from Schopenhauer. Hitler was a big student of Schopenhauer.
And Nietzsche.
And Hitler's atheism was one of the most extreme forms you could find, because he viewed the Christian religion as a mental illness.
Oh, Hitler? I don't think
that was his private belief.
Oh, but hold on.
That's a sign of mental illness, the Christian way.
Yeah, be careful, because his sister has taken his memoirs later on. We're talking about his relationship with Nietzsche, and Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, and even Darwin. Apparently, they've sort of all affected him in one way or another. But he's taken, so that's what's called social Darwinism. Because remember, he didn't just do it to the Jews. He did it to the Jews. He did it to the blacks. He did it to the disabled. He believed in the next human race should be perfect. So any imperfection, homosexuals as well were included. So he just had a very crazy idea. But I don't think religion or lack thereof were he just was mad with power. I think that's what it is.
So existential message.
Say again, sorry? Oh, I'm going to read it. That's from, I think that's David Miller, right? Yeah.
Can you enlighten?
Yeah, make it bigger. Are you prepared to accept that both monogamy and polygamy are products of human pair bonding? Yes. David had to have his stamp on things. Yes, but actually I agree.
One very primitive and rather nasty form of morality is act with very high moral principles to people who are part of your group, and be viciously savage to anybody outside it. Exactly. And every now and then we find groups in our society which behave exactly like that.
Yeah, that gorilla example was exactly like that.
No.
Remember,
during the Second World War,
he killed the
that's what was going on. The Japanese were really nice to each other and horrible to everybody else. The Germans were really nice to each other and absolutely horrible to everybody else. When the Australians were in New Guinea and fighting the Japanese, there was no holds barred. You don't take any prisoners. You get someone down, shoot them. No morality, whatever. But you look after fellow Australians. So we're very tribal species.
Well, we still
which
do.
places a severe limit on how moral we can.
And you know, things like racism is a remnant of xenophobia, which was very, very handy to have. If you lived on the side of a river and the resources in front of you is the only thing you can have, and the other group on the other side of the river who looks stranger than you, you had to be afraid of them for a very good reason. That's why xenophobia and being wary of people that don't look like you or don't have your custom, you still see it. If you go to a party and you're the only person there, you'll find yourself getting closer to those who are similar to you. They have maybe age group, they speak like you, maybe a bit of an Aussie accent if it's an international place. We do that all the time without realizing that we still have remnants of that. We just need to overcome it and understand that tribe, we still can be tribalistic, but just open the tribe a bit bigger to be the whole world, and then we would have a problem.
It's been one of the long-term problems of every Christian church. The members of my church I will treat really, really well. The members of every other church I hate. I will kill them. Strong, destroy them. Beautiful. The Sunnis and the Shias and the Shias are the same way. I love it.
Yeah, please go
Very
on.
tribal. Well, the basic thing is the evolution of morality.
Yes.
Right? Well, the next step is non-biological. Okay, this will get back to artificial intelligence. Now, like you all love him, Elon Musk has said this is going to be the biggest threat to humanity. Right? We don't know the limits to it. I'll tell you what, if you just go on the web, right, and just find some of these AI-generated, I don't know what you call them, beings, right, that are speaking to a, they're not being, manipulated or reading a script or anything, right? They are able to put together a sensible, coherent narrative. We have why more humans around, okay? They've said their purpose. Well, they mean. Now, we have a problem with our own morality. What the hell do you do about any of Putin or Idi Amin or him or whoever? Blow up the World Trade Center, right? Because somehow or other that sort of satisfies your Muslim, thing to kill all Christians or whatever. So we really can't work our own problems out. But like I said, the biggest thing facing humanity, forget stupid global warming or some, unbelievable thing, right? If we do get intelligent things that are in charge of stuff, like already our power systems and so forth, right, can be overridden. And some have been shut down. We blew up all the accelerators, things that were separating uranium in Iran from remotely.
Yeah.
And this is a real threat. Now, if you're going to study morality, there'll be points of it. We have some generating a Hammurabi's code for the 21st century. I think we're going to create.
Yeah.
It's likely we really need something like that.
This is going to become a problem because when you stab somebody, and you can feel the dagger and the blood is on your hand, there is that connection. You know that you're acting. But once you go to killing groups of people without even looking at their faces through a button, this becomes a problem because you can be detached completely from the guilt of having to see the consequences of what you've done. Add to that things like Westworld, Ex Machina. These are TV series, X-World, with Christopher, what's his name? The Welsh dude. But it's basically talking about the emergence of consciousness within machine. What if the machine gains consciousness at some point? What would be the repercussions? Stephen Hawking warned about it. He said, "Be careful. We could be. I mean, have you ever contemplated that we could be running a simulation? Right now, this is a simulated world. It doesn't even exist. Have you ever run across the simulation hypothesis where the world, the very world we're living in right now, it's actually simulated, it's not real? That what you've said has already happened and we've destroyed ourselves, and this is our consciousness being rerun on a machine?
We already make a war machine you can take control. People just can't do anything about it. There's a good picture on the moment called Lancaster, over the British Film Festival, right?
Yeah.
Really, the last remaining guys, and probably London, 30,000 feet.
Yeah,
Residents,
Yeah.
40,000 people getting incinerated. 2/3 of them lost their lives in the process, but it's a very, very remote thing. Boom.
yes.
You just take one there, you blow the further away. Don't look each other in the eye and sort of make a decision. But
Yes, and we do it right now. When you go to the supermarket and say, "Oh, I'm going to have a T-bone or rump steak or a piece of eye fillet," it's no longer the cow. It's no longer the goat. It's no longer. It's you isolate it, disassociate. You don't feel the guilt. It's grill. But if you start asking people, okay, your dinner tonight is going to kill your own animal, and you got to look it in the eye, and it might start playing a little bit around you, and you might go, I'm not going to kill this beautiful thing. I want to play with it. You know, it becomes then a more of a difficult decision.
we had an artist do it here, actually, outside the art centre about 40 years ago. You got a cow, killed it, stuck it in a glass box and watched it rot. Let it do that. You got carted away pretty bloody quickly, right? Because people don't want to see, like about this.
Yeah. That's going to, I mean, these questions, this conversation, and I've got to finish in the next 5 minutes, guys. And that's why I said the repercussions of this conversation today, nothing changes. Nothing is going to change. Today, we only sort of might have learned about how it all began, but still, we have the responsibility of keeping this world safe for us and for our children, for our offspring, for ourselves. We have to talk about it. We have to talk about what are the priorities of today. What should we be doing today to make sure that today is a better day for us and for everybody else? Science is not going to inform moral decisions. That's why philosophy is never going to die. This is going to be another lecture. Has science killed philosophy? I don't think it will ever do, because science, like David Hume has said once before, you cannot get aught from is. What you should be doing is not going to be ever informed by science. It might give you some indications, it might give you some information, but we still need to understand what is important to us. What is important to us? And therefore, art, music, poetry, and the human condition will still prevail. It doesn't matter how much science is going to rise. There's another movie that I'd like to encourage you to watch called Equilibrium by Christian Bale. And it talks about a future where emotions are prohibited. You cannot show any types of emotions whatsoever. If you are captured to own a painting or a musical piece or listen to the opera, that is going to fog your decision, and it's prohibited. And there were moral police that will stop you from doing that.
Why should we watch such a film, may I ask?
Because the twist is wonderful. Because Christian Bale was one of the police officers who was supposed to stop people from doing that, opens a trunk of a car and finds a puppy. And by the rule of that particular government, he needs to shoot the puppy in the head. So he was the most gruesome officer of them all. He hesitated for a few seconds, and the next scene, he actually adopted the dog. He opened the window for the first time, he sees the sunset, and plays some opera in the background and start crying. And just got to realize at this point, it doesn't matter how much science you're going to surround yourself with and facts and stuff like that, the human conditions of you have to feel the moment, and what you feel right now is still very, very dominant. And it cannot be discounted or thrown away. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
What about you too?
I'll just mention the next lecture will be by me in December. It's called Bertrand Russell Against Christianity